A dirge of farewell. Many turned their eyes at him, shamelessly staring. It did not bother him upon arrival, and it had not as of yet become more bothersome. But their ability to tell apart the outsider was impressive. Though the crow feather cape was rather unique, there remained their almost supernatural sense to instantly treat him like a fool who did not understand them, simply because of origin. But they dared do little else than just stare and whisper amongst themselves, and so he did not mind. What was on his mind, however, was the hope that a certain man would soon emerge. With arms crossed and leaning against the street corner, he patiently and privately observed the store on the other side of the street. Its entrance aligned right in front of him, a purposeful choice of position, as it would mean his target would catch him as soon as he stepped outside. The store sold flowers of all kinds, judged by the front being beautifully adorned with large and small variations of colorful flora. Eventually, holding a pot with a number of shining white flowers and bearing a top hat and burgundy overcoat, exited an older man. The very same he had been expecting. He shoved away from the wall and took a few steps out on the sidewalk, stopping just at the edge of the wide street so the man could spot him. The man with flowers also stopped as he saw him. They stared at one another from their own side of the street, until the flower-bearing gentleman turned and walked to his right up the cobbled road. Quickly he walked after him, and soon came up on his left. Up close, the man was in fact quite tall, almost a head longer than him.
I have questions I gather you have good answers for.
The man's face and pace was unwavered by the statement.
And who is the man asking? The man that got to them before you.
The tall man's brow sunk down over his eyes menacingly. He lowered his voice and continued.
I since then know quite a bit more, like how they were hunting beasts, and that there are more that do so regularly. I came under the impression my purpose lay here in town. Now it seems every string I follow has led me to the spider, so to speak.
It was hard to read what the man was thinking. It was a risk for sure to approach him, but such is life. The man stopped, turned and stared him straight in the eyes for a drawn-out moment.
Your name? Fiachra, from the hinterlands. Gammon. I'll hear your explanation on the way.
He promptly continued his walk up the street, leading in the direction of the large clock tower. Fiachra sighed internally and followed along.
Our way is surely strange to you, so I won't bother with the details. I came here, and I want more information. On my first night I already encountered two menacing fellows that surely was a risk to others. I followed them and witnessed them slaying a beast of sorts. Their behavior was appalling, so I pressured them to see a reaction. They responded with violence, and they got violence in turn. Tortured souls they were, and I set them free. You may think what you will of it. Then, while I said my farewells, you came. Your farewells? For the departed?
They walked along a large bridge over to another part of town. Here the streets were smaller and more winding. After a few turns they stopped in an alleyway. The location made Fiachra slightly uneasy. Few escape routes if the man decided to frown upon his deeds. With pot in hand, he looked at him.
You have gathered information. Tell me now, what do you know about me? You are the master of those that hunt for beasts. Are you also aware that beasts are a widely unknown problem? Not until recently.
German flashed a smile. He then opened a door masked in the guise of walled-up planks against the brick wall. In reality, it concealed a small doorway leading into a large, round room, like a giant cistern but surrounded by buildings. German jumped down onto a platform where a more conspicuous door was. The leap was not far, but the cylindrical chamber was fairly wide, and the distance to the floor could give the simpletons nausea. He opened it, and Fiachra leapt down after him. The corridor within took them out into a garden where German stood, waiting for him.
What you did for those hunters, I had intended to do. You are no enemy of mine, for you did it gracefully and mercifully.
He led Fiachra into the tranquil garden that triggered the occasional memory of home. They were not alone, and around the gardenscape were individuals he deduced to be other hunters. Differing from the eyes cast by the citizens, the hunters acknowledged him little. Only the occasional pleasant nod, likely because he was in the company of their respected master. Fiachra followed him quietly, sensing the man's reluctance to talk for the moment. German stopped at a little grave just outside a stone house. He looked down at it briefly before turning and kneeling down at the opposite side, in relation to the gravestone, off the quaint path leading into a door. Growing from the soil around the neat little stone had already been planted more of the same shining white flowers he had carried in the pot. He now began to gently place the ones he had brought in a little cluster. He went about it with such care, it appeared as if he was talking to the white lilies. While he waited, Fiachra stood around to see more had been set out in some spots, seemingly without a pattern.
I like this flower,
he finally remarked while still focused on the white lily.
Just like someone I knew. The one this grave belongs to.
He took a while to answer, making Fiachra regret his question somewhat, fearing a line had been crossed.
Yes. My condolences.
He stood up and led him back down the path and around into a niche below the stone house. There stood a bench where he sat down. Fiachra joined him.
So then, quite the mess you've been mixed up in now. I am starting to have a few questions of my own, now that some time has passed. I'm sure there's time for all our questions. Yes. Well, go ahead then. The beasts. Never seen an animal like them. They are not animals.
Up until that point, it had only been a humorous speculation, not so much after hearing the truth about it. Yet it was so fitting, and he understood more and more why he had been guided to Yharnam out of all the places in the world.
The blood. Yharnam's holy blood, is it? Partially. Those men, hunters of beasts. What happened to them?
German took a breath while looking out over the city from their little hidden place.
Their hunt is what it is. I doubt that is all. This holy blood, I presume it had a hand to play. No. If so, very little. A hunter is never like the beast he hunts. You ought to know that hunters are always more fearsome than their prey. We do take the blood to give us back our vitality on a hunt, but the blood that we spill, no, it is their hunt. It takes them and seduces them. Much like the blood. I take it that not all hunters suffer this fate, then. No, many are still here and are diligent in their duties. They keep their wits about them, and never show the signs. Which are bloodshot eyes, shattered pupils, and anger. Unjust and fierce anger.
His eyes turned up to the sky and watched the clouds pass for a moment.
From where I come from,
Fiachra took the word.
we see death as the beginning of a new life. A life like a dream. Some, however, take to the nightmare while still in their life. It is not their choice. Such is the nature of the nightmare. It takes you. I sense it is what happens to your hunters. A dream. What do your people do with those of the nightmare? We send them to a pleasant dream. There is no cure for the nightmare-stricken. They cannot choose their own fate, so we spare them. No, I think I knew that too. Now, Fiachra of the faraway hinterlands, why did you come to Yarnam? It is a matter of belief. I will tell you how it is, and ask that you do not judge. It will only be easier for yourself if you don't.
German leaned back, relaxed and ready.
Dreams are insight into deeper things. That's why we ascend to the dream when we die. In the night, we may see through a window. It is hard to understand what you see, but one can grow better at it. I lived a life for myself, loved many women, but never did I take one as my own. I only hunted and lived in the wilds, untamed, like the beasts that roam the hills. Then a certain dream would come to me, just when I started to become tired. I became aware of my selfishness. We are all meant to live with one another. I never did. My dream told me to change, but I only knew the hunt. Did you also know how to kill? Like I said, I lived for myself with no master. I was a wicked man that took what he wanted, including some lives.
German nodded with sympathy rather than judgment.
I searched my dreams for where I was needed. I started to roam the lands, and during the nights, I roamed still. I was taken here, to Yarnam, for in my dream, I saw a town with people drowning in blood. Cruel people with red eyes. I knew it was the nightmare.
The sun began to descend. The orange light made him think how bizarre it all was. After all this time, here he was.
This dream, it is something deeply spiritual, religious even. It is. You know, here in Yarnam, we are spiritual as well, but faith has changed since science entered the picture. Are you a man in need of evidence and truth, Fiachra? Most of the time, yes. Well, it sounds to me that our faiths are very different. Here, I see a divide, where only some know truth, while others know to believe. In the hinterlands, they seem to be conjoined. How is that? Your dreams. They are yours. Be it God, or just a part of you. It tells you your truth. Perhaps it is specifically Yarnam you saw. Perhaps not. But here you are. Whatever is speaking to you in your dreams, it wants you to find the truth. Just like me.
Hearing how he talked about something foreign to himself, Fiachra took his words with some skepsis. But he also felt there was a sober understanding of it, not at all that of one who was biased or unknowing of the topic. But to him, he could not so suddenly consider German a wise sage with insight in something he had never delved into. Or perhaps he had.
It is strange how it sometimes can work.
German looked up at the leaves of the trees.
I know of the dream you speak of. I feel its kinship, and I do not take you for a man eager to kill. The hunt is a dirge of farewell, or it should be. A proper send-off for a better place.
Honestly, Fiachra,
I am so very tired. No one knows, but I am. Without having been exposed to this place, you yet possess the understanding of the hunt. I can tell. And you care for those men and women who falls to a nightmare. I would see them sent off properly.
He stood up from the bench and slightly motioned with his hand for him to follow. He walked inside the building where he, behind a stone altar of sorts at the room's end, bent down. When he returned back up, he held a blade that he placed before him.
This is a blade of mercy. This has taken many lives of hunters. If you feel this is your purpose, I would see that you take it, and spare my hunters from the nightmare that has taken them.
The blade was unlike any craftsmanship he had ever seen. How someone could fashion such a serpentine blade out of steel was beyond him.
It is strange indeed. But we both must just have been lucky. When men like us meet, there's little need for explanation. I will take the blade, without needing to feel the camaraderie your hunters feel. For I know the nightmare to be a fate one never wishes on one's worst enemies.
German smiled. The smile, in a strange way, made him appear older than he likely was. A lot of pain was released, having been contained with that smile.
Thank you.
The garden in the workshop reminded the carrill of the forest near Bergenworth in a way. She agreed that the hunters out of all were the most in need of such a wonderful little place. She walked along the quaint stone path up to where the small workshop stood. A man dressed entirely in black emerged from the building and walked down the path towards her. She could not help but to stop in her tracks. The man had long black hair tied behind the head loosely, clean shaven and a sharp chin, wearing a peculiar cape made out of black feathers, slung over a black overcoat. Although his appearance possessed every quality for being handsome, she was too intimidated to fully agree. He stopped himself in front of her.
What a peculiar hunter.
Looking into her eyes, his tone of voice struck her as him never acknowledging her person, and had only stated the observation to himself.
Oh, I am no hunter, sir.
Awfully formal of you, my lady.
A hand stretched out from under the cape.
Fiacra.
She gently and slowly took hold of it. The grip he returned was softer than she anticipated.
Carol.
Tell me, what business do you have with the hunters? Never before have I seen someone not of our ranks in the workshop.
I know German. We are old friends.
I see. Well, I would say he could use the visit, but I don't know him that well. He has advised against entry while he is in there, but perhaps that only applies to hunters.
What do you mean? Is something wrong with him?
Not particularly. He just favors working alone, I suppose. You take care now, Lady Carol.
He nodded her off and walked past her. She suddenly felt even more horrible about herself for not seeing him earlier, and she prepared to find him in a worse state than initially believed. The doors to the workshop were closed, so she knocked respectfully.
German? It's me.
She tugged at the door handle to slightly pull it open, throwing a cautious peek inside. The only light came from the open fire. In front of it sat German with a large piece of cloth in his lap, a dull brown thing onto which he was in the process of embroidering a pattern. She chuckled and opened the door fully.
You surprise me. I thought you only cared for grim weaponry, and here I find you doing proper ladies' work.
She walked in and he only acknowledged her by looking her way, then promptly returned to the threads.
I enjoy working with my hands. The work itself may take different forms.
Such a worldly man you are.
She took a seat beside him before the fire.
Still at it with the hunt?
It must be done.
She found herself feeling estranged from her old friend, not quite knowing what was on his mind.
You know, I have resigned my mentorship. No longer the matriarch of my little school of research.
How so?
Well, with the recent events, it did not feel right. I had to change. Can you understand?
He nodded, eyes fixed on the fabric.
The truth is, I conversed with Lawrence. He is in shambles. I hate to seem like this, and I wanted to check up on you too.
He nodded slowly.
That is kind of you.
He grew silent, which made Carol indecisively look around the workshop to escape the awkwardness.
Ah, is that not Maria's hair ornament?
Her eyes locked onto a small silvery piece of regal jewelry with a floral pattern above the row of spikes that would keep the hair in place. His head turned to look at it.
It is. I wanted something of hers to keep. A memento, I suppose.
That's sweet.
They became quiet once more.
So, German, I am not good at this, so please help me.
He pinned the needle into the cloth where he gave pause to his work and looked into her eyes.
I appreciate it, Carol. You needn't say much. How about you? My work keeps my mind occupied. Was leaving truly the best for you?
Yes.
She answered with a determination not common to her, and he noticed it immediately.
I thought it through. I had to create distance. I was very sad, and I have accepted that I will continue to be sad for the remainder of my days. But I know how I will live with this sorrow. I now want to help the friends I have left to deal with the sorrow I know we share.
There was a form of pride to the smile he gave her, a new one she had never before received. He stroked his hand through his long, graying hair while he took a deep breath.
Good. But worry not for me. I must be alone for a time, like you were. I promise you soon enough, I will be fine. But matters like this, each one must find their own way. I have yet to find mine. But I know I will. It helps greatly, you coming here. It reminds me there is a world to come back to.
I'm glad.
Have you seen Luna? I would speak with Lawrence myself, but I'm afraid I can't bring myself to do it just now.
I understand. And no, I have not. I fear she handles it like she usually does. That is to say, ignoring it as good as she can.
They grew silent and still. After some time, German resumed the making of his pattern. Carol stared into the fire. The fact escaped her why exactly German would do such meticulous work on a lady's garb. The party walked through the large gate of central Yarnam into a round square decorated with a fountain. The day, even extending to the whole week, had been uneventful for them, providing mild patrols. Anselm thought it somewhat strange since the reports coming in from all over attested to a mystified unease that had its source in something not wholly understood. But as long as there was no immediate troublemaking, His duties were only simplified, and his position did not extend to broader issues. But regardless, it did not keep him from wonder. They continued up towards the heightened street that transitioned into the great bridge. The bridge was positioned above the houses and streets, and further ran above the valley where Old Yarnum lay, and leading to the cathedral ward, the highest peak of the town. The wind picked up once they stepped out onto it, and made way towards the silhouetted grand cathedral in the heart of the district ahead. Another company of figures approached from the other direction, emerging from Cathedral Ward, and they encountered one another on the halfway point of the bridge.
"How's it going?"
A fellow constable asked, as they casually stood by the high stone railing.
Well enough. Nothing that is stirring the peace as of yet.
One of the black-dressed church guards replied.
Nice. Very good. I hear the church is in quite a bother.
Nothing too concerning. Nothing we've suffered from, at least.
Yeah, no, I suppose not.
But what about you? No rascals stirring the people today?
Nah, well, nothing all that alarming. Our patrols have gone swimmingly, at least.
How fortunate.
Yeah, indeed. Been quiet for us too.
While the group of 6 men talked, one had retrieved a little pocket bottle with something strong, which Anselm's companion partook of before handing it along.
The butcher on Elm Street has expanded. Quite a boon, I tell you. You should go there if you haven't already.
One of the church guards took the flask.
There are perfectly fine butchers back in the ward. What makes him so good? Something he inherited. His family have been hunters and butchers since only Old Yarnum existed. They know what's best and will gladly tell you about it. Never met a more upstanding bloke.
Huh. And they've expanded, you say?
Yeah. Took over after another one some streets over.
Perhaps it was one of those hunters that took him out.
The man smugly suggested.
What hunters? Just some wives' tale.
Perhaps it is the hunters who have snatched up all the felons as well. Perhaps it is them we should be thanking for these peaceful days. The group chuckled amusedly. The man holding the flask took a sip and passed it along.
There had been a little scare with those beasts or whatever.
Yeah, I heard.
Nothing that ever came up around the cathedral. Not a one? Not that I heard of, at least.
What do you church people make of it?
The patrol from the cathedral ward looked hastily amongst themselves.
Dunno. I mean, some say it was just an animal that got loose, and others say it's some unleashed nightmare. Not even the officials give a straight answer.
Well, we don't really know what to make of it. By no means is it frequent, but there is definitely a pattern slowly emerging. But otherwise it is very calm and quiet, save for those incidents.
How strange. Beasts. Must all be strange circumstances.
Yeah.
You don't suppose it could be some labyrinth beast? Heard there are such things down there. They shrugged and placed little engagement in the answer, as he had done with the question.
Perhaps.
bound to have something slip up occasionally. But I don't really know how it works, to be honest. They fell into a shared silence for a moment, and the lid was screwed in place on the flask.
Whatever it is, the church got a handle on it. Wouldn't want my duties as constable to entail hunting beasts.
The master hunter was where he lately always was to be found. The workshop was Kenrick's first thought when attempting to locate him. There, German was absorbed in his work, sitting by the work table with minute instruments, tinkering with something unseemingly small. He admired him for a moment, where he sat doing the work that founded a whole establishment. In his hunts, he would occasionally think of the process that birthed the magnificent armaments and tools. But for some time now, had the master been closing the doors behind him as he entered the shop, requesting undisturbed solitude. He never asked, because he thought himself to have guessed the reason why. Master German, do you have a moment? This you'd want to know about. He was not acknowledged, but he continued anyway. Just now, this morning, a beast rampaged through the market. Luckily not many were present, and hunters were already on the spot to dispatch of it. But this time it was sheer luck that not many were caught in its way. I'm afraid this whole ordeal is becoming increasingly troublesome. German had stopped his work and now laid the tools to the surface of his workspace. But after the ensuing silence, Kenrick anticipated him turning to address him, but he only picked up a minuscule object to inspect it closer, then continued with his curious work.
More beasts on the rise.
He absent-mindedly remarked, without providing any valuable input. It increased Kenrick's already stressful mood. Sir, the beasts. I'll be the first one to admit that I feel overwhelmed here. Also, if this increases to continue, how safe is it to utilize the blood for ourselves? He was soft with his words, yet he made an effort to sound as decisive as possible. Once more did German put down his work, but this time turned to face him. Staring at him from his chair, he looked tired and surprisingly old.
Are you a faithful man, Kenrick?
He seemed to ramble like an old man as well, but he humored him. I think it's hard to remain faithful as a hunter, sir.
No, I know. It is hard. But have you taken to heart what I always say?
Fear the old blood. He nodded.
Fear humbles the brave hunter. Poor George never understood that, and he was the first of many. Many that I fear will repeat his mistake, despite an old man's nagging.
You're not that old, master. He attempted as a genuine compliment. It made the corner of the master's mouth twitch somewhat.
But would you dare hunt without the blood's aid? Refuse the power it gives your flesh. The power it gives our weapons.
Kenrick slowly shook his head, only once. German held up the thing he had been working on. A shiny silvery bullet.
Another tool. A medium for its power. Useless without the holy blood.
What is it?
A quicksilver bullet.
He could make out what seemed like the shape of a fingerprint engraved on it.
It will take your blood. Only a little. But enough for this little thing. The quicksilver will absorb the blood and give it tremendous strength. Depending on your blood tinge.
Blood tinge, sir?
A clever name, no? A thing only achieved with the holy blood. A thing that would deprive you every advantage you need against the beasts. Everyone has a reason to partake in this communion. Even I. The church speaks a language the people well understands. They speak with faith, and it tells them that the holy blood is the gift of the gods. So much is true. You needn't be faithful to agree.
He retrieved a box filled with several bullets of the kind he displayed, and started to touch each and every one with his thumb over the mark.
Power deserves reverence and respect, especially power wielded by oneself. Some lack the discipline, and they succumb to the weaker parts of their being. This turns them into things they were not supposed to be. Things they do not know the nature of. Forms wrought by failing in the trails of life. This the church tells the public, and we hunters do well to listen, lest we hunters succumb to the hunt. For the shape of this failure is not that of those poor things we hunt, but is, in fact, something frighteningly similar to ourselves.
Some stared in awe, some in surprise, and some seemingly in some form of disgust, or even horror. The common Yarnamite had a fiercely keen eye for deviation, to the point they could fool themselves to see it in each other. The mark of an outsider that, according to common conception, brought more trouble than they did fortune. But he disregarded them, since he knew their eyes were likely drawn to the ruggedness of his attire, and not in the precautionary glance of spotting a stranger. His cape was tattered at the ends, and his burgundy coat was well worn and faded. The collar of the cape as well as the brim of his top hat obscured most of his face, which is, after all, a provocation for curiosity by nature. He turned off from the populated stone road, down a narrow stair between the houses, leading out into a shaded alleyway, empty of people. He turned sharply right and walked towards the opening into another larger street. Times had apparently changed, and quite suddenly. And when times change, but a mind finds difficulty keeping pace, one starts to feel old. If the hunt was to change, so was he, no matter his age. But would the other manage to change as well? His mind involuntarily wandered back to the image of a face that looked so lovely with the hunter's tricone, despite never wanting to be called a hunter. For better or worse, he could never chase away the portrait. He knew why it was there. He knew it well. It was their sins that kept her away from his world. The sins that completely devoured her. And now her face would eternally look back into his mind's eye. Never again would he see those eyes that had looked back at him where they sat in the sun outside the Bergenworth workshop.
What is that?
A high and vexingly curious voice asked. He stopped and turned his head to see two little boys and a girl. The girl stood firm, pointing straight at his side.
Oh, this old thing?
He clutched the handle of the burial blade.
Yeah.
I use it to protect little boys and girls like you from things that would want to hurt you.
Will you protect Mom and Dad?
Of course. That is the job.
You are fighting monsters then?
I do. Monsters that bump in the night. I hope your parents tell you to stay inside after dark.
They all nodded with widened, fascinated eyes.
Good. Then be on your way. Monsters might be around here.
But it's not dark. Monsters only come out at night.
Not these kinds. Take to the church's teachings well, children. These monsters only show up when grown-ups disrespect the holy blood.
They appeared confused, but retained a certain respect for the elderly's words. In their silence, he feared he had dallied for too long. They had been alone thus far, but now there was a growing sense of yet another presence, lurking steps, and the ravenous, yet concealed breath of a predator.
You must go now,
he said with a little distress and as much authority as he could.
The monster is coming.
The children showed initially a slight discomfort, only to rapidly change into unbridled fear before turning their heels and running. Not even screaming, only running. He himself took hold of his blade and turned to see the once human resident approach from the balcony above. Nothing had been like this one. Elongated arms with only claws for fingers. The face had grown into a short muzzle that bore many sharp teeth. Tattered clothing hung on the fur-covered body. Glowing yellow eyes were focused on him as it carefully and predatorily perched itself on the railing. It growled while breathing heavily. It lunged down from the 15 feet height, claws outstretched. German stepped to the side and intended to slam the blade into the hilt, but found himself in no time to do so. The beast was already upon him, quicker than most. It roared ferociously, but the horrid truth was that a slight hint of a human undertone could still be distinguished beneath the terrifying beastly sound. In a contradictory sense, it made a calm grow within him. A calm born from what he knew to be right, that they were just people. They deserved better. With the blade held at his side, he evaded the claws thrashing at him, and as it jumped forward to bite at him with the ferocious maw, he stepped by and passed it. It was quick to turn towards him again, but in that time he had drawn out his blunderbuss from his back and fired. The potency of the new bullets was immediately apparent as the sizable beast covered its face and staggered backwards. He moved in and struck 2 quick horizontal slashes. The beast regained its awareness and scurried further back as German sliced downwards while stepping after the beast with each cut. He slammed straight into the ground and the thick blade left marks in the street while sending sparks flying from when metal clashed with stone. The glowing eyes looked up at him and roared, to which he unloaded another volley from his firearm and jumped backwards. The beast was in a fury and would not relent until it had achieved its share of blood. But before it could jump him, he had slammed down the blade and swung the scythe around his shoulder at it. The beast leapt away from the swing, but Germa was quickly upon him right away by jumping high and swinging down with the burial blade. With his relentless attacks, the beast's reflexes were truly put to the test, and in his sleep he only scratched the arm of the fiend. It was about to retaliate and lunge for him. He met the assaulting monster with an uppercut from his pommel, then brought the blade right down into the beast's skull. There it was left, lying as the glowing eyes faded, and a deathly monstrous sigh escaped it. Blood pooled from its head and mouth, and he retracted the blade from it.
By the gods! Never have I!
He turned to find himself observed by an inappropriate spectator. A woman in a richly adorned dress and carrying a basket stood in shock.
You slew it! A real beast!
Sorry matter, my lady. Really.
Oh, but such a fiend needs to be shown the blade like you properly did. But where did an abomination like that come from?
German looked back at the carcass while holding his bloodied burial blade by his side.
Like I said, a sorry matter.
He gazed towards the looming astral clock tower of the grand cathedral. The lady in an aimless state turned her head the same way.
But I promise we will keep the beasts from you.
Thank you, noble sir. By what should I call you?
Oh, no matter. Hopefully, you never see someone like me again. But I fear the times are changing. The nights turn sinister.
Someone like you, sir?
He started to walk towards the cathedral and muttered along the way back to her.
Fear the old blood. By the gods, fear it.
Blade of Mercy. A special trick weapon passed down among hunters of hunters. One of the oldest weapons of the workshop. Splits into two. The weapon's warped blades are forged with siderite, a rare mineral of the heavens. Most effective in swift attacks, such as after a quick stepping.